Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of our delegation had a good night's rest after a long day yesterday. And it's time to get started. So welcome to the second day of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council Malaysia Business Mission. And I want to start by warmly welcoming Mr. Prem and Mr. Azim and thank them for meeting with us today. This is the
Hello.
first time I think this is the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting you guys. So nice to meet you. I hope this is the start of a long-standing relationship. For our members, let me just give you a little bit of background. Mr. Prem is the CEO of Malaysia Kini, and Pramesh brings Malaysia's top independent news website to over 8 million people. The site played a key role in informing a generation of voters, leading to Malaysia's first democratic change in federal government in May 2018, the first change since independence. And Mr. Azim is the managing director of FMT News, and prior to taking that position, he was with UEM Group and UEM Sunrise for 8 years, being a special officer to the managing director, with oversight on business development, finance, and strategic planning. So both of them are accomplished journalists and have experience in managing businesses. So I think that we will have a great engagement with them today. Mr. Prem, Mr. Azim, today we have a large delegation of American private sector companies here with us. And I know that they all look forward to engaging directly with you. I'd like to recognize our committee leadership, ConocoPhillips and Coca-Cola, for being here with us today and helping us lead the mission. Before we jump into the discussion, let me just give you a little bit of an overview of our mission and our key themes. During our annual Malaysia Business Missions, we meet with government officials to reaffirm our commitment to supporting Malaysia's dynamic and inclusive recovery and continued growth. We also want to acknowledge and commend the government's efforts to combat the pandemic and support the domestic economy. And once again, the vaccine rollout has been quite impressive. Given the political turmoil Malaysia has faced since the last election, our members will be very interested to listen to your views of what's happening on the ground and what to expect come GE15. And also your best guess on when that is going to happen. We look forward to hearing your candid views, and this meeting will follow Chatham House rules. So a reminder to our audiences, this meeting is off the record, will not be recorded, and contents of the discussion should not be shared or attributed to our speakers. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our speakers, Mr. Premesh, Mr. Azim, to give welcoming remarks and make some opening, and then we will go to a moderated question and answer with questions being raised in the chat box, and Alberto will give me a hand in making sure I don't miss anybody. So why don't we start with you, Mr. Premesh?
Hi, good morning, and thank you for the very warm welcome, and it's really nice to be here to be able to talk to your members about what's happening in Malaysia. I think, as you mentioned, I think it's your second day of the program. So I assume that you've been also speaking to other business leaders and organizations. So, I'm sure Azim and I can add some views in terms of how it's going in terms of the media. I think that, as you may have already heard from yesterday, we are in the midst of Malacca, a by-election, state by-election in the state of Malacca, which is a small state just south of the capital. And it's actually quite an important by-election in the sense that it is the first time where 3 different parties are actively contesting the elections. You have the old regime, Zaid Hamidi and Najib under the Barisan Nasional. And then you have the former Prime Minister Muhyiddin's coalition called Perikatan Nasional And then you have the Anwar Ibrahim-led coalition called Pakatan Harapan. So it's the first time that these three coalitions are squaring off. And in many ways, it's a prelude to the federal election. You ask, when that may happen. We expect it sometime in the second half of next year. That may be a likely scenario, or it may drag on to the first quarter of 2023. Elections are not due to the second half of 2023, but we expect that the current situation of political instability may necessitate an earlier election. So it's really interesting to see what happens in these state elections, because it's really a question of where the Malay ground is. As you know, the Malay voters play a very large influence in our electoral system, and that there has been a lot of shift among those voters, especially in the last election, which led to the first change of government since independence, as you just mentioned. So it's a question of where these voters settle this time around. Obviously, there's been a lot of scandals, and the COVID pandemic has made a big impact. But really, it's a question of where and how does that configuration work. If the Barisan National Front wins, they may force Mohidin and his political partners, such as the Islamic Party PAS, to make more compromises ahead of the next election, and in a way join forces. There's always a pressure for if you think about these three coalitions, for the coalition which is the weakest, then team up with one of the two other coalitions to have a stronger pact following the election. So I think that is it's a bit different than what we see in the US, but of course, it's a political system, and all the political actors will act in their best interest. I think that's really much on the political front. I think that if we take a step away from the immediate political election, the real big, more looming question is what's Malaysia's future in the next 10 to 15 years? Is it going to continue to be more closely linked to a nationalist, Islamic dominant ruling coalition, or is it going to move towards a more liberal, open, multiracial type of coalition? The former being representative of Barisan Nasional, and the latter being more representative of Pakatan Harapan, which was in power for just 22 months. So I think for Malaysians, for the world, I think that's a big question of what happens. All our political leadership is also aging. So another big question is that perhaps how more younger people, younger politicians, younger influencers will emerge within the political system, and how will that change the overall dynamic, over the next 10 to 15 years. So I think those are that's kind of the narrow viewpoint and the longer question. But I'll hand it over to Azim to add, his opening remarks, and then we can come back with more questions. Over to you, Azim.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mr. Presh. Azim, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and Pramesh today. I am deeply honored to be on the stage to speak with you. And I came to know about the composition of the audience. Many are from companies whose brands are very dear to me, and I've been, using their services and products growing up. So very honored to be here. But as an introduction, I think for Pramesh, Malaysia Kini has been around for a bit longer than FMT. I think for the benefit of everybody here, I wish to introduce to you about FMT before I give the basically an overview of Malaysian political dynamics, perhaps. Now, FMT is a bilingual English and Bahasa Malaysia news agency. We primarily focus on national news, politics, and business, but we are also very big on lifestyle, sports, and technology. So our goal is to provide intelligent and balanced journalism since 2009. And this formula works, and I think Pramesh will agree with me that When people get balanced news, that's when they started to trust the news organization, report all sides. So we have seen a meteoric rise in our number of readers in the last 5 years. And we have about 5 to 8 million unique visitors per month, becoming one of the biggest media organizations in Malaysia. And recently we tied up with Media Prima, which is the biggest media conglomerate in the country. And through content collaboration with them, we now reach about 15 million Malaysians in total. And to give you a context, that's about 83% of the digital news readership in Malaysia, or about 50% of the Malaysian population. Now, FMT we are not a pollster, but because we are mass media, we have our finger on the pulse, and we understand sentiment through the reaction to our stories based on the analytics numbers, and also from the feedback we get from our reporters. Now, the question that we may have here is whether Malaysia is, after 60 years of the same ruling coalition, are we in a transition, or are we going down a path that is less than ideal? Now, as you know, Malaysia has gone through 3 changes in government in the last 3 years. But you see, earlier on, before G14, there was a lot of excitement about Malaysian politics. But after the second and third installment of the government, we can see that the interest has waned. And because of political, as you pointed out, Michael, turmoil and COVID, we are seeing a double whammy in this country. And because of that, people are now more concerned about bread and butter issues. They are concerned about their children's education, whether they have, some of them, whether they have roof over their heads. They are more worried about those things than who's in power. And because of that as well, but what's good that comes out of it is that Malaysia is becoming more discerning of their leaders, and they tend to look beyond superficial rhetorics or attempts at using racial or religious cards. While they hope for better leadership, they still have their own priorities, which is to safeguard their livelihoods. Now, Malaysia is going through a transition and towards a more fluid democracy. For the first time ever, we are not governed by BN, we are governed by few governments now. And this transition could go either way. It could spiral downwards, or our democracy would mature due to increased sophistication on the way people think. Now, I'll give you 5 indicators that are very important to look at that may suggest that Malaysia still have a lot of hope, actually. And we are transitioning towards a mature democracy. The first is based on our reading. The society is becoming a lot more sophisticated because of their level of education. And they are becoming more critical. And from the readership, from the comment section, from the numbers of the stories that we put out, we can see that they appreciate intelligent arguments. And when we put out content that captivates them, they appreciate it. When we put out content about human interests, showcasing the successes of Malaysians, they love sharing it. And we can see quality comments coming from all races, especially the Malays. And they talk about bread and butter issues such as education and even public policy. So that is a good first sign. The second is there is a move towards forming a multiracial coalition in politics. Now, I think since we are not recording this session, I can share with you some insight that we are gathering. After the Malay-led governments, the 2 Malay-led government that we experienced, and we can see that there's a bit of struggle there in order to get the country back on track. But because of this as well, people come to the realization that it is not about having a certain race to leading this country, and that delivery is very important, or their livelihoods will get affected severely. So there's an increased realization that all races must work together to govern this country. We all have equal stake in this country, and we must start to acknowledge it. The longer we don't acknowledge it, or we try to deny it, the longer it takes for us to get back on track. Still we can sit down and argue about the origins of the new economic policy, which is the affirmative action that has been boosting the Malay economic well-being. But we must admit, if it's not because of the shortcomings, we won't have this conversation. and we must be honest with ourselves. And the people and even the politicians now realize that the government must be comprised of a multiracial parties in there. And we have, based on our reading, we have seen subtle compromise between UMNO, DAP, and PKR actually, and this is this is unprecedented. For your information, for the benefit of people of the audience, DAP and UMNO has always been enemies, but now we, from our I would say intel gatherings, it seems that there is a strong push towards working together. It will not be obvious, it will not be explicit, but something is being there. The third indicator is the rise of the young generation. Now, I am a millennial, and my generation, I would say that we are less fixated on any political party or ideology, especially the even younger than me, the Generation Z. We are exposed to global developments, social media, and especially on the approach to racial issues and values of advanced nations. And the young generation would like to vote for a party that can give them a better future, better career growth, and a great experience growing up. So they are coming in strong through the movement called Undi 18. Whether or not it will get implemented this year or the next GE is still uncertain. But this movement calls for the inclusion of the young ones as early as 18 years old to be in the electorate. And there are 7 million new voters coming in addition to the 13 million electorates we currently have. And this is a game changer because we do not know where their allegiance is. The fourth indicator is the government will take a few years to stabilize, but maybe it can be a good thing after GE15. The thing is they will need to learn to work together, or they will risk losing power. While the government change, policies would change, but we feel that it will not be so fundamental because you see the institution in Malaysia are there. There's still a lot of shortcomings in the institution, but generally, when the government becomes fragmented, the institution will have to step up to the plate in order to sort of safeguard our way of life. And because of that, that would actually force the institution to be more, to improve themselves and heading towards a mature democracy. And finally, the fifth indicator is increased media independence. Because the government has become somewhat fragmented, the media has now been able to move a bit more independently. And you look at corporate structures of media companies in Malaysia, especially recently Media Prima, which is the largest media conglomerate, it's become privatized. So it's no longer owned by the government like it used to be. So we can see that there's a serious push on the media front to provide content or a perspective from all sides. Now, coming back to why we are here, and we are talking to business leaders here. So for FDI to come in, businesses, they hate uncertainty. I come from a finance background. I studied in LSE and I've been in business. I can appreciate that uncertainty is your worst enemy. It affects your assumptions in your feasibility studies, your projections, and it makes it very hard to mitigate risk. And so to fix that, I think the businesses must forge a close relationship with institutions, with media, because we have the ears of the people, we have the ears of the public, we have the ears of the government. So through us, we can give you a voice. If you need certain policies shaped, or you need to even sell your products, use us. We are here to help you to make your case heard and be seriously considered by all stakeholders. And as a concluding remark to my opening, I feel that there's opportunity in adversity. Malaysia has many things to fix, but I would say that all nations go through this phase. America had civil wars, France experienced a long revolution, Russia experienced the collapse of communism, China experienced the failure of the Great Leap Forward, which caused famine and death of hundreds of millions of the people. But all of this event, I would say, has taught them good lessons in leadership, and they have all come out stronger. If anything, Malaysia's transition is, I would say, much less bloody, and especially in our parliament, we have yet to see a single chair flying. So Malaysia, I would say, it is a sleeping giant, and businesses that can awaken it has much to gain from it. We all want Malaysia to succeed, and everyone would eventually benefit from it. And being media with a mass market reach, we can help you. You can count on us to ensure that you thrive. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you both for very interesting opening remarks. I mean, we learned a lot about some of the demographics facing this election and some of the way in which institutions are evolving, and looking forward to the elections. I think it's really fascinating that you're getting 7 million new voters. That's like 50% additional voting there. And how these coalitions are going to be formed is going to be a real is going to be really something to watch. And in fact, we have from Nike, we got one question which said, how about these parties and the coalitions? Do they differentiate themselves on economic policies? You know, do they have kind of clear divisions among well, I guess among the three parties, or are there any clear coalitions that are going to form? And are they based on any common approach to economic policies? So maybe you can, let me start with Prem on that, and then we'll go back to Azim.
Sure. Thanks for that question. I suppose the question is a little bit in reference to, for example, the US, where Democrats and Republicans have got, say, different policies on tax. I think the differences in Malaysia are not as stark when it comes to those sort of fiscal and monetary policies. I think we've had a large budget deficit for many years under various governments, and that will continue. Our interest rates are pretty low, and that has been kept stable. The tax regime has changed a little bit, but not too much. But it's more in reference to, say, tax regimes in comparison to our trade competitors, say Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, etc. So it's more, small changes in tax due to other changes in the region, etc. I think so it's not. I would not say it's a very contrasting economic policy. I think the biggest differences are really about whether or not you crack down on corruption, how much you try to run a clean government, how you look at more consistencies on policies, to what extent you run more populist policies in terms of handouts to the B40, to the those who are less able. Those are some of the big question marks. I think the treatment of or the status of Sabah and Sarawak within the federation, those are some issues that may differentiate the coalition. So I think all coalitions favor foreign investment, and try to welcome investments in various fields. Generally, it's moving towards foreign investment in more strategic fields rather than labor-intensive fields. There has been a move to try to reduce dependence on foreign labor. So in the manufacturing sector, industry where those are very labor heavy, those may be eased out. I think the big push has also with the US has that US customs has cracked down on importation of, say, rubber gloves and other products in companies that do not adhere to labor rights. So definitely labor rights is something which is becoming increasingly important. And we also see a much more push towards green issues on climate change, on ESG. So I think that definitely they would favor investment and companies that come in with favorable ESG policies and strong adherence to labor rights. So this is something that I can see happening over the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Azim?
All right. Thank you for the question. I'll try to make it simple, and for the benefit of everybody here, whether or not you are aware of the Malaysian component parties and circumstances they are in. Generally, Malaysia has three coalitions at the moment. One is called PH, Pakatan Harapan. One is called PN, and the other is BN, right? So Barisan Nasional, Perikatan Nasional, and Pakatan Harapan. Briefly, PN and BN, they seem to resemble, they have some similarities because the composition of PN and BN are largely Malay-based parties. You have your UMNO in BN, and which is the dominant party in BN. The other multiracial component parties in BN are much smaller now. In PN, you have PAS, and you have Bersatu, which are all Malay parties as well. And PN now works with GPS, which is an Eastern Malaysian party. Now, unfortunately, so PN and BN currently, they tend to slant a bit more towards racial policies. They always talk about race and religion. That has the reason or justification for them coming into power was also premised on race. So when PH won the election in GE14, the whole idea of PN taking over from PH was to say that PH, Pakatan Harapan at that time, was less Malay, right? Because truly, it was actually they won the election with only about less than 30% Malay votes actually, and for the first time ever, we saw a big, sizable portion of non-Malay leaders in the government. The policies of PN and BN, PN, because it's new, is still trying to develop its policies, to develop its stance on tax and trade. But generally, they have sort of replicate a lot of what BN has done in the past 60 years, because a lot of their leaders inside are from BN. So you'll see that they tend to be more conservative I would say in the racial sense, appealing to the Malay market. But increasingly, because of that kind of focus, I would say that the people are becoming more discerning, and they are not gonna just accept that order of the day, because at the end of the day, it's all about delivery of the government. Now, on the other hand, you got Pakatan Harapan, which tend to be a bit more liberal, or a lot more liberal, a stronger non-Malay composition in there, and they have promoted more liberal democratic ideals even before elections. They have promoted because of the multiracialism in there, they are to some extent advocate for more equitable economic opportunities for all races, right? But in terms of policies, when they were in power, I wouldn't say that they were much different when it comes to tax or trade. All of them are quite pragmatic in the way they approach policies. But when it comes to winning over voters, that is when you can start to see the difference in how they communicate their messaging. For PH, they try to appeal to the non-Malays, they try to appeal to the multiracial Malaysia. PN and BN, they try to lock in the Malay electorates, and then later on they try to work on on trying to win over the non-Malays as I would say as something after they've secured the Malay base. And finally, you have GPS, right? So GPS is East Malaysia. You have your Eastern Malaysian political parties. Generally, the sentiment is they too are quite they want to have a more, I would say, liberal Malaysia, more multiracial, because in Sabah Sarawak, the demographic is that it's not dominantly Malay. They have even more ethnicities there. They cannot afford to be too racial there, I would say. So overall, I would say that there's no clear difference when it comes to pragmatic policies on trade or economy, but racial in the racial sense, there are vast difference between all these three coalitions because the composition of them. Thank you.
Well, it seems like there is, both of you guys agree that there's a lot of pragmatism, and on economic issues, they seem to be pretty well in alignment. But the real battleground seems to be the race issue and how to grab their own portion of the votes. Well, we've got a couple of other questions lined up here now. So let me now turn to Hasnel from IBM. Hasnel, over to you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you, Ambassador. I'd like to expand further and try to find out your thoughts, Pramesh, on the point that you just made. You pointed out that both coalitions are very pro-FDI. My question to you is this: we do not see that on the rhetoric that has been displayed by the various administrations that have come into power. They continue to call for more FDI, but they are extremely slow in trying to ratify CPTPP and adopt reforms in regulations that impact trade. Case in point, cabotage, and now the discussion on licensing cloud service providers. For you, Pramesh and Azim, based on the journalists' interaction with policymakers and business players out there, why is that? Why is this happening? Thank you.
If I can give my views, I think that while they definitely want to attract FDI. I think that last 3-4 years has been dominated by politics, right? Political questions. So they want to get investment in, but their focus is really internal politics. As far back as 20, even before the last election, with the whole 1MDB scandal, coming up, it's nothing but internal politics. So they really spending more of the time making decisions on political questions. So, for example, on the issue of cabotage, the minister in question has a strong alliance with a particular company, and that's preventing them from moving forward and opening up the market. So due to heightened political competition, the nexus between particular business companies and particular politicians gets strengthened because they need to derive a certain amount of financing in order to fight their political struggles. So the expenses related to politics is increasing, and that's becoming a drain on business. So they rather go for a more protectionist measure in the short term because that flow of cash into the political system helps them in immediate need. So the FDI is kind of put on the back burner, once this kind of political situation is more stable. So I think they will welcome investment, but I think in terms of making changes to policy to attract that investment is a little bit more difficult in the short term. But I think that hopefully will become more balanced, after the next election.
Yeah, I echo what Pramesh said. In fact, I was about to say the same thing, but since you've already mentioned that, I can add up a context perhaps. Now, when it comes to FDI, during the Najib government, they had ETP, Economic Transformation Program, Government Transformation Program. It was very well, I would say, articulated and being publicized in 2011, 2012. So there was clarity in the way Malaysia want to do business, and they did massive roadshows. There was a lot of infographics, a lot of PR exercise. So people were very clear on what the direction is of the country, what are the industries that the country wish to focus on. And we have seen, the economy sort of grew quite rapidly, up to 7%, post economic crisis of 2008. And we can see, property prices were increasing. The economy was quite vibrant before 1MDB, came, crashing down. So, but you see, at that time, when the government was quite stable, they are able to do that. And when we come to this point where the government isn't actually elected, right? So we got two governments that isn't actually elected coming to power, and you now see that they are quite fragmented. They are not actually friends from olden days, all of them. So they see the system of, I would say, to raise funds is broken, right? So they are watching over their shoulders all the time. I think there were attempts to try to raise funds, but because there's the system is already being disrupted, there's sort of a scramble to source for that kind of funding, at least to get to GE 15. So yes, what Pramesh said, it's quite consistent with our observation. Until we have a proper GE and where a government that is rightfully voted by the people come into power, it will be quite, you will see maybe inconsistency in the way they execute versus what they promise. And talking about GE 15, so the question is, how long is this going to take, right? So Pramesh mentioned about second half of next year, GE 15. We do feel it could be that, but it also depends on Malacca and how Sarawak turns out. If we see BN winning, it's quite possible that they will want to have they would want GE to come in earlier to ride on that momentum that they have. So, but if PN wins, maybe it will take a bit longer. Regardless, this government is can fall anytime. Given that I would say they have not reached an equilibrium on their dealings. But what's even more, I would say, even more concerning is even GE15, right? Running up to GE15, whether there's clarity on the side of the people on who to vote, right? So over the past couple of years, they have changed a lot. The composition of coalition has changed. So whether people they know what they are voting for and who they are voting for, right? I think, and that's where media has to come in to actually educate the people. Yeah. So that is why I think there's inconsistency to what they are saying and what they're promising. Is a lot of the decisions are now quite, there's political consideration in the decision that they make for the time being.
That's an interesting answer. Everybody says, well, it's kind of up to politics. I think we ought to explore that a little bit more, but we do have another question here, which is, let's see, I think this one was from Coca-Cola. Yeah. They're interested to know your views on the judiciary. How independent is it? This is important as it provides confidence, especially for the business environment within the country. And after the several recent decisions relating high-profile cases involving political figures, what do you think? Which way is the judiciary going? Can we trust it?
Azim, you want to take a first stab at it?
Be my guest. I'll take it on after you.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I think that definitely we have very good judges, but obviously when it comes to political figures, it's a big question mark. A lot of the current decisions recently has actually been moved by the Attorney General in terms of reducing charges or letting certain political figures off. Not so much by the judiciary in some cases relating to the political figures who are in court. It's the Attorney General who has been letting them go, dropping charges or amending charges, etc. So you have got that influence, the Attorney General acting in a political fashion rather than one guided by the rule of law. And obviously, the judges do come under pressure to make certain political decisions. And that has been done even previously and now. There are some good judges. There are many good judges as well who have stood their ground and made good judgments, even though there would be repercussions. But that it's really a case of who the judges are. But I think that in terms of business, Malaysia has always understood that an independent judiciary is important factor in foreign investment, and has tried the best to play fair and have a level playing field when it comes to more commercial businesses, especially when it affects foreign interests. Malaysia does not want to be seen as a pariah state. Malaysia does not want to be seen as a state that does not respect rule of law, especially when dealing with foreign interests. So they've had it's a bit more of a bit more independence in those areas. So I think the short answer is that while the judiciary is definitely not totally independent, they try to be when there are other cases like foreign interests at hand.
Azim.
Yeah. So see, at least for us, we are not in a position to completely say whether they are independent or not, right? So, of course, but what we do know is that some cases, when when being judged, people question it, right? So people question them and how certain particular figures receive more leniency, right? And some being freed from technical grounds, right? So we have seen people questioning these things, and you see, judiciary is about giving justice, and is about making sure that justice is upheld and seen to be upheld, right? But when we have for example, say a case where certain political funds is being released after the authorities can't figure out where it comes from, without actually being able to tell the public why they have to release it, in such a manner, right? Cash is being cash is in the house of that amount, right? So you tend to question, right? So how can this be a norm? Is this a norm in advanced nation, right? The spirit of justice has to be there, and how the case is being treated must make sense, right? So from this kind of readings, we will know that even if the judiciary is independent, there are still some judgment that people question, and I guess what Prime Minister is right. As far as political is concerned, we always tend to question, right? Even the Anwar sodomy case. I mean, have you heard of any other person being charged with sodomy other than him in this country? Then we don't, So politically speaking, the judgment that comes out has always been in question. There's always it will never end debate, right? But when it comes to business, when it comes to giving justice to corporations, we see better luck there. The only issue maybe is that sometimes it takes a long time, and we understand from the Chief Justice always talked about rather the administrative kind of issues in terms of expediting cases. A lot of cases are being delayed, has affected justice being upheld. But generally, in business sense, the spirit of giving justice is still there, pretty much there. It is just when it comes to politics that is always a drama in Malaysia.
Yeah, I can see that, and I thought your comment was right on. I've not seen anybody else charged with some of those charges. All right, the next question is going to come from our country director, Tina Jamaluddin. Tina, over to you.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you, Mike. There's been a lot of reports in the news, especially coming out from MITI, regarding the ratification of CPTPP and RCEP. From your conversations with the government or with insiders within MITI, do you feel that this is just a talking point that Minister Azmin has been saying, or is there real appetite for the government to go ahead and ratify these two?
Okay, I must say that I have not had a lot of conversations with Azmin and his insiders, so I can't say for certain. Again, I think the preoccupation now is with politics. I think generally Malaysia does have an appetite for trade agreements, and it is in their interest to sign those agreements. Obviously, there are some sticky issues that Malaysia is perhaps less happy about. Government procurement is always a big issue. Settlements of international disputes are always an issue. So previously, pharmaceuticals, intellectual property has been an issue. So they are definitely sticky points. But Malaysia sees itself as a trading country. It depends a lot on trade, on foreign investment, and that has not changed. Minister Azmin is a very practical and astute politician, and he also favors, an open market and trade. But again, I think that until the political picture becomes clearer, it's harder for an unstable government or government with a small majority to make tough political decisions. So they may want to push that down a little bit until they have more stability in government.
Yeah, what do you think, Kasim?
Yeah, well, I've had, personal, I would say I had personal debate, but friends have had personal dealing with Azmin Ali. We find that he is quite fast in implementing things that are within his power. But when you pointed out, policy matters, right, of the highest level, which requires the mandate of the cabinet, or even to like extend the parliament, and that always becomes a problem, right? So when we talk about trade agreements, are all quite major policies which affect the economic dynamics of Malaysia, which protect certain industries. So this would always need the kind of consensus which they don't have, the kind of consensus in government. So as much as Azmin would like to expedite things, he's always constrained by this circumstance. So yeah, until a strong government is being installed, decisive action on those fronts will be quite challenging. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe for the last question, I'm just kind of interested in your views on the way in which any one of the three different parties or three different coalitions might look at foreign affairs, and how would they look at the development of ASEAN, particularly in light of the US and China tensions that are coming up, and the desire for ASEAN to try to form a stronger economic union.
Right. Interestingly enough, our current foreign minister, Saifuddin Abdullah, is one of the few people who have been in all three coalitions. He used to be in Barisan Nasional, and then he was in Pakatan Harapan, and then he was in Perikatan Nasional. So he's a man of many political alliances, but he's also quite a liberal in that sense, and quite open and very easy to communicate with. I think that Malaysia's foreign interest is in a stable ASEAN and a stable Asia. I don't think Malaysia favors any confrontation between the US and China. Although some amount of confrontation has helped Malaysia, because certain companies have started to offshore from China, and Malaysia has been a beneficiary of that. So definitely, it's not to say there's been no benefits, but we are again a trading nation. We're a small nation. We're not a huge power. We definitely favor stability. So in that sense, we don't full-on confrontation between the US and China will be detrimental. Malaysia has had a long historical strong relationship with China and the US. We're one of the first countries to open up a political relationship, back in the 70s, by Tun Razak, at a time when China and US were at a strategic stalemate. So we've had a lot of China's investment here. We continue to depend on China for many of our big infrastructure projects, and obviously US plays a big role in the region in Malaysia. So I think that what we would like to see is some sort of negotiated settlement, something a bit more of less of a trade war between the US and China. And although China is big, if you take ASEAN as a whole, 700 million people. If you take India, 1.3 billion. If you take Japan, Korea, these are all very big nations and economically, very influential and powerful. So China it's going to be difficult for China to ignore sentiments across Asia. You can't ignore South Korea, Japan, ASEAN, and India put together. So whatever you want to say about the US, the countries closer to home actually matter, and having good relationships with those countries are also very important for China. So I think that, I think that if we can all manage China's growing ascendancy and economic power, while still welcoming trade and investment from the US, from China, that would be the ideal situation. And I'm sure that would be something that the foreign ministry would be working towards.
Very good. You could be a diplomat yourself. Azim, go ahead.
Right. So how Malaysia is managing its foreign policy, basically. I think it's good for us to have a bit of understanding on how we were in the past and where we are now. So in the past, I won't go too far off. During Mahathir's time, he had a very, I would say, a strongman statesman approach to foreign policy, right? He uses OIC to as a stage for Malaysia to sort of champion, Islamic ideals or agenda. Still trying to advocate for moderation, although I think in some parts of the world he was deemed an extremist, right? But then what was clear was it was actually, the foreign policy was actually centered around him, right? To have Malaysia as an Asian tiger, to stand in the eyes of the world, right? And it was led and driven by Tun Mahathir. Then fast forward to Najib, right? Najib initially in the first part of his premiership, he was quite open to work with everybody, and he embraced the US, provided a lot of incentives, and through his transformation programs. But later, when the 1MDB situation occurred, we see that he sort of slanted to China, right? Because it appeared that China was a bit more accommodating, and at the time there was the one Belt One Road initiative, and we were undertaking projects such as ECRL, whose contractor would actually come from China. So the foreign policy was actually sort of driven by the circumstances of the country, and Najib sort of reacted to it. Now after Najib, when Tun Mahathir came along again the second time, he wanted to reinstate that strongman leadership all over again. He tried to reintroduce the Asian tiger image of Malaysia, and then of course he did not last long, and then Tan Sri Muhyiddin came in. There was not much of foreign policy narratives there, and then Ismail Sabri came in to power. He did his first maiden speech at the UN. He was talking about keluarga Malaysia, right? But yet to see any strong policy with regards to how Malaysia, is gonna, I would say how Malaysia is gonna work with the world, right? So the foreign policy of Malaysia has always been centered around the leader, rather than the foreign minister. It's always centered around the prime minister. So in order to see an indicator of foreign policy, you have to look at who's leading the country, his ideals, and his motivations. Right now, the foreign policy seems to be, being accepting of any form of investment that will help elevate Malaysia, provide jobs, and in return be able to grow the businesses as well. But in terms of having a strong, I would say, a position, we have yet to see that, right? We have yet to see that at the moment. The US-Chinese relationship, especially, I'll give an example, goes beyond just the trade war, right? We also talk about big data and big tech corporations now. And big tech corporations now, they seem to be a big part of our lives, right? But the question is, how far is it affecting the lives of people, not just in Malaysia, but in the world? How are they using data? How are they using personal data? Malaysia has not have a strong stance on this yet. They came up with a policy, a digital economy policy, but still it is, It remains to be policy. But whether or not Malaysia has a position to protect personal data is still not clear, right? But I think Malaysia is still, to a large extent, welcoming of any FDI that is of mutual benefit to both US and Malaysia. Especially now, the focus has always been to upskill. So we need investments that are high quality in terms of technological kind of investment where we can upskill the country and be able to increase the I would say the productivity level or to a more sophisticated kind of skills. Yeah, so that is the focus now. It's all on skilling and sophisticated upskilling of this country.
Very good, very good. Excellent answers. That definitely much more emphasis on the economy and on the digital economy in particular, rather than other types of foreign policy issues. And it's true in ASEAN. It does seem that strategy, grand strategy, is really grand economic strategy in ASEAN, and that seems to be the leader. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today and your responses to our members' questions and comments. And before we leave, I just wanted to flag for you our members' CSR and Sustainability Fact Book, which will be sharing with your team, and it provides an overview of the great work our members are doing in Malaysia. But we think that beginning today, we look forward to continuing to work and live out, carry on our business alongside of you and your team, and continue to work with you to find what your views are on the questions of the day and on what is going on within Malaysia. I wanted to also thank our staff on the ground, Tina Jamaluddin and Emma Tabatabai, for helping to arrange this particular meeting, which was really, really great. And it's left everybody ready to ask even more questions. So thank you again, Mr. Prem, Mr. Azim, and I'd like to pass the screen to you guys for any closing remarks that you might want to make. Mr. Prem?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was a great chance to exchange views and also to hear from your questions, what your concerns. We will bring these your questions also to the powers that be during our meetings. Once again, you're most welcome to Malaysia. Malaysia is a great country. Malaysia is truly Asia. So we look forward to having your companies in Malaysia, and we can help in any way possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Prem. Azim.
Thank you for having me. It was such an honor to be here today with everybody. I guess my last word will be yes, there are uncertainties, but at least from a business perspective, that uncertainty can be mitigated if you work with us. We welcome you to contact us after this, because at the end of the day, the media plays a huge role in determining the direction of the country, because we have the eyes, the ears of the people, the government, so we can be your voice. Feel free to drop me an email for a chat, see how we can help you, with your business or your ventures to make sure that it is successful.
Well, I'm sure you can count on continued engagement with all of us. So it only remains now for me to ask my delegation to join me in a virtual round of applause to thank you so much for your great engagement with us today. And I also want to, from beautiful downtown Tanjong Pagar here in Singapore, I bid you have a great week, and we look forward to working with you again in the very near future. So bye-bye, and thanks again for all your help. We appreciate it. Bye-bye now.